and do that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Willis, and I'm today's meeting moderator. Welcome to the Lead and Copper Rule Revision Community Roundtable for Benton Harbor and Highland Park. Two quick notes before I turn it over to Eric and Carrie from EPA to kick us off. The first is that the meeting is being live streamed, as I mentioned before. And the second, if you could keep your phones and Zoom on mute when not speaking, that will help minimize the background noise. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to you, Eric, and then to you, Carrie. Eric.
Well, good morning and thank you, Rob. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Eric Burnison, and I am the Director of Standards and Risk Management in the EPA Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water. I'm really excited to be here today. My group is the group that has developed the lead and copper rule revisions, and we're also the group that will be conducting the review of those revisions to try and identify ways we can better help communities today. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion, and I'm joined today by Carrie Whaling. Carrie?
So can you hear me all right? I didn't get a chance to test this out before I started. I'm Carrie Whaling. I'm an Assistant General Counsel in EPA's Office of General Counsel, and the team that works with me, and we work with Eric as attorneys to develop the rules. I've been working on the lead rule for 20 years or so, on and off. We've been working with Eric to develop the rules and defend the rules, and very interested to be being able to participate today to hear what you all have to say about the rules. And we'll be working with Eric and his team to make any revisions or figure out what our next steps are here. So I really appreciate the opportunity to hear from all of you. So thank you for letting me be here today.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Before I turn it back to Rob, I want to say a big special thank you to Reverend Pinckney, the Benton Harbor Community Water Council, and the Gracie Wooten of Solidarity and the Highland Park Community Rights Coalition for working with us to organize today's discussion with these two important communities, Benton Harbor and Highland Park. This is the first combined community roundtable that we have, and I have to say, having sat through the discussion before the meeting started, I was a little concerned about whether or not folks would get along, but you have put me at ease. I'm really impressed with the familiarity and the respect with which you're speaking to one another. I'm really looking forward to hearing the discussion and your thoughts about how we can improve the lead and copper rule revisions. So I wanted to just say that we're conducting these roundtables because it's really important for us to hear directly from you and the communities about lead and copper rule related issues that are most important to you and how lead and drinking water has impacted your community. I want to welcome everyone, all the community members here today, including all the representatives from community groups, utilities, local and state governments, citizens, and all members of the public that are viewing us today via live stream. I want to give a special thanks to Senator Stabenow and Representative Tlaib, who will be providing some input for us today. We recognize that the range of community experiences regarding lead and drinking water is really important to our consideration. We look forward to hearing your perspective on these critical issues. Your input will help EPA as we review this regulation to work to ensure we're doing the best to protect public health, especially for those that are most risk in communities that have been impacted by lead in their drinking water. We hope that you've been able to watch the Lead and Copper Rule 101 video that provides some context about the regulation that we're reviewing. I want to thank you for the time you're taking here today, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and perspectives about how we can move forward and ensure lead and copper rule revisions are going to protect communities like yours. So thank you. Rob?
Great, thank you. Reverend Pinckney or Gracie, anything that you want to share before I turn it over to, we've got a 2-minute recorded video from Senator Stabenow and then opening remarks from Representative Tlaib. Dr. Reverend Pinckney or Gracie, anything?
I just want to thank the EPA for allowing us this opportunity, this space that we have today, because I think this is a golden opportunity for you to understand exactly what the problem that's in Benton Harbor and Highland Park, and actually around the state of Michigan. And, when we talk about Benton Harbor, we're also talking about Highland Park. And when we talk about Highland Park, we're talking about Flint and Detroit. So I really, truly want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Expensive fun.
Gracie, you're still on mute.
I was unmuted. Good morning. I'd like to thank everyone, and it's so good seeing all my friends from Highland Park and my new friends from Benton Harbor. I just want to say that, we're two small communities and we both have a high concentration of poverty and disinvestment. And it is just so wonderful that we're here to share with EPA this morning. Thank you.
Great. So I am going to now switch and go to a 2-minute video from Senator Stabenow.
Hi, thanks to everyone taking part in today's roundtable, and special thanks to the Environmental Protection Agency for hosting this important event. Here in Michigan, we know the importance of clean and safe drinking water. Boy, do we. Benton Harbor, Highland Park, Ferndale, Royal Oak, and Flint are just a few of the Michigan communities dealing with excess lead in their drinking water. While Flint made national news when more than 9,000 children were poisoned by the city's tap water, we know they're not alone. During water testing in 2019, Highland Park had the 4th highest lead levels in the state. One resident's water tested at 210 parts per billion. That's 14 times higher than the level at which action is needed. In a little more than 2 years, Benton Harbor has received 5 state-mandated public advisories warning about the level of lead in some of the city's drinking water. Last year, Benton Harbor received a $5 million EPA grant to replace lead pipes, and that's certainly a step in the right direction. I'm heartened that President Biden has called for replacing all lead pipes in our country. And as a member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, I co-sponsored and helped pass a bill through the Senate a few weeks ago to do just that. And here in Michigan, our state is in its first year of a 20-year plan to replace every lead service line connecting a home to a public water supply. For the lead and copper rule to be successful, EPA must closely coordinate with states and local communities. Today's event is proof positive that the EPA under Administrator Regan is committed to doing just that. When even one child is poisoned by lead, or one household can't drink the water that flows from the kitchen tap, we know there is a lot more to do. So, thanks again for being here today and sharing your expertise and your concerns. I'm here in DC because we're in session, but I have to tell you, you can count on me to work every day until every community has safe water. I'm proud to be your partner.
Great. I hope the volume and audio worked okay for everybody. Great. So next, I'd like to turn it over to Representative Tlaib. I know that she's prepared to give opening remarks.
Thank you so much to EPA, but also really thank you to all of my community members, my neighbors in Highland Park, but of course our neighbors out in Benton Harbor. Thank you all so much for continuing to speak about these issues, especially environmental injustices, and how it really impacts our communities in the direct human the way, and not just talking scientifically. I think that's why you all need to be at the table, not only through this listening session, but to truly make sure people understand the urgency that we all are living with right now. You all know Biden administration, has a duty and responsibility to all of us to not only replace the Trump rule that puts our communities at risk, but it also has a duty to end the crisis of lead contaminated water in our country, throughout our country. You all know our Black and Brown communities especially are at most risk, and they cannot afford continued inaction. They cannot afford half measures. You know, this continuation to partially replace lead contaminated pipelines instead of fully replacing contaminated pipelines, understanding that no amount of lead is safe, y'all. So we truly deserve clean water. And that is something that, again, I know they will listen and hear fully from me and many of my, especially my Highland Park residents who also continue to demand clean water. We need to, every single lead pipe in America dug up and replaced. Flint is everywhere. I continue to say that to folks. We have as many as 10 million lead service lines in the ground poisoning people as we speak. We need these lines fully again replaced in the next decade or sooner. And we have the power to do it, y'all. We just need the Biden administration to follow through on its promises. And that's something that, again, I hope you all relay during this listening session. If we're going to trust the science, we need strict science-based standards that get shovels in the ground today. We need a strict maximum lead contaminant level of 5 parts per billion. But even beyond that, we have to recognize that there is no safe level of lead exposure. You know, this continuation to tell us we can do this or that, but at the end, our children are still swallowing or drinking amounts of lead in their water. That is unacceptable. Our goal in everything we do should be to get to zero. No children, again, whose brains and nervous systems are still, again, being developed, are being attacked by lead exposure. So we have to stop it now. Congress, of course, all of us have has our part to play too. We need to pass water infrastructure reform that invests, tens of billions to remove lead pipes at no cost to homeowners. That is something that I continue to be very passionate about. And I'm so grateful that the EPA is putting the brakes on the Trump rule. That is very important sign, and actually listening to impacted frontline communities like ours that are far too long have been treated as sacrifice communities. For too long, we have given corporations a license to pollute our poorest communities in exchange of poisoning our bodies and where we live. The NRDC found that race is the strongest predictor of how long people have to live with drinking water violations. I am hopeful that the EPA's extensive community listening process will lead to the right outcome, which is a bold, visionary, tough lead and copper rule that prioritizes public health, environmental safety above all else. Thank you again for all of you. I've worked with Benton Harbor folks in the state legislature, and as an attorney at the Sugar Law Center, I know what you all are dealing with. For my beautiful, unbelievable, strong community of Highland Park, we have been fighting not only to stop water shutoffs, but also to really, truly get to the root causes of lead contamination in our water. We all know our children are going to schools where literally, and EPA knows this, they got garbage bags over their fountains, over their drinking fountains in the hallway, because it's that contaminated. And so they deserve better and they deserve more. And so again, I can't thank you all enough. I love seeing you all here. You're the community members that, again, that remind us of why we're here and who we're working for. Thank you with that, EPA. Appreciate this. If there's anything I can do to continue to be a partner, of course, I'm going to want more always, because I think, again, our residents can't wait any longer for clean water.
Great. Thank you very much, Representative Tlaib. Okay, so I'm going to take 2 more minutes of your time. I'm going to quickly go over some quick ground rules and how we plan to run the meeting, and then we're going to jump right back into it. So you all should be seeing my PowerPoint screen here. It's got just a couple of rules that I want to talk through. The first, as I mentioned before, please keep your line muted. You can mute and unmute by pressing the old-time looking microphone on the bottom left-hand side of your Zoom screen there. Keep your video on. It would be our preference to do that so folks can see each other and we can try to make this feel a little bit like a real roundtable. At least if you are speaking, I ask that you please turn your video on if you're comfortable. I'll ask that when it's time to participate in the roundtable, that you raise your hand so I know that you're interested in speaking, and then I can call on you by name. The way you raise your hand is by either hitting Alt-Y on the keyboard, and that will raise your hand in Zoom and let me know that you are interested in jumping into the conversation, or you can also find the raise hand button by pressing the participant list. And so I will remind folks about Alt-Y as we go through the day. The fourth one there is please strive to make your voice heard, maybe at least twice during here, so don't hesitate to speak. And then we've got a couple of little exercises where we're going to be using the chat feature. And so I'll ask that you participate in that if it makes sense. And then please mind the time. We've got 2.5 hours today. And so I will be giving you a signal, say something like, please limit your remarks to 2 minutes or 1 minute, depending on how many folks are lined up. I also want to recognize that we're all working on Zoom, and we're all working in places that are different. Some folks are on the road, some folks are in their house, some folks are in their office. And so if we have interruptions or distractions, we understand, and we've all been there. I'm going to do 2 other things, and then Reverend Pinckney and Gracie, I'm going to turn to the community presentations. The first is I want to talk to you a little bit about the chat exercise. So we've got 30 minutes, 30 to 35 minutes set aside in 3 separate discussion areas: addressing lead in drinking water, identifying lead in drinking water, addressing lead in drinking water, and communications and public outreach. There's a chance that that in the 35 minutes that we have set aside that we don't get to everyone's comment. So I'm going to be offering you an opportunity to put into the chat any thoughts that you have about those topic areas at the end of the topic area. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn over to Reverend Pinckney and the Benton Harbor community for their presentation. And I know Commissioner Singleton that Reverend Pinckney asked that you kick off this with remarks around 2 minutes. So Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on this call, on this roundtable, and I thank the EPA and all those who are definitely concerned about the lead in the water and the copper problems here in Benton Harbor. You know, we've been dealing with that for some time. You know, I guess when they built that system, they never thought about that, and you know, was wondering probably why people were getting sick or having different ailments and things. But now that we know, it's definitely refreshing to hear that there's a lot of people concerned, and you know, getting to the table and doing something about it. So I really appreciate that. That's music to my ears, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody to resolve this issue. You know, at one time, I think Benton Harbor had some of the best tasting water around, but we didn't know about the lead things. But now that we know, it's good to hear that we have partners and friends in different places to help us get that straightened out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Singleton. Commissioner Adams, 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be sitting at this round table. I'm Commissioner Mary Alice Adams, serving the 3rd term as an elected official, and part of my platform was the over 100-year-old infrastructure that we set on here in Benton Harbor. And I think I can speak for the community as a whole, the country. Surely if America can go to other countries and spend funds on helping them to rebuild in their disastrous times, that they can do the same for the American people without it costing them anything. I think that's something that's owed to Benton Harbor. For the last few years, I've sat with the Water Council, with EGLE, EPA, which is now EGLE, and discussed a lot of these matters. And what we need more than anything are resources. And what would be nice if those resources came straight from the federal government instead of having to stop somewhere else to be issued out to us. I'm also the mother of one child of 6 that was born in Flint, Michigan. And after age 12, accumulating epilepsy, I had no idea that lead could actually make epilepsy worse. She resided in Flint with my mother up until a couple of years ago, upon her death. I had no idea that lead was probably part of the problem that caused her epilepsy to get even worse than it was. So it's not just children, but those that with illnesses that lead affects as well. And I'm just happy to be a part of finding resources, talking about this issue that definitely needs to be solved. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Okay, Reverend Pickney, we're going to turn it over to you, and we will bring up your PowerPoint slides up on the screen. Angela, can you please share the PowerPoint slides? And Reverend Pickney, I turn it over to you.
Absolutely. The LCRR recommendation to the EPA from Benton Harbor, Michigan, and it also puts the date here. Next slide, please. Benton Harbor presentation team. Reverend Edward Pinckney, Commissioner Ron Singleton, Commissioner Mary Alice, Dr. Donald Times, Dr. Walter Davis, Dr. Anita Marcree, Dr. Curtis Long, he was unable to attend today, Brandon Titus, Freshwater Future, Goshan Clay, Shamara Clay, Frank Blue, the manager of the Water Sampling Department from Benton Harbor, and Eugene Anderson, Sergeant of Arms of the Benton Harbor Community Water Council, and my wife, Dorothy Pinckney, the manager of operation for Benton Harbor Community Water Council. Next slide, please. This is Emma Kennard. She is the one who actually started the Benton Harbor Community Water Council by her exposing that the water was contaminated. Emma Kennard has been not only a great person in the community, but she is the one who are responsible for people saying that now we have lead in the water. But for years, they never admitted that we had lead. Next slide, please. It says that Benton Harbor has a high level of lead since 2015. Benton Harbor public officials and residents are grappling with more than 3 years of high level lead in the water, in the drinking water that exceeds the state limit. The crisis was discovered in 2015. Benton Harbor residents don't feel safe drinking their tap water, which is a true statement. They don't. We don't want to drink the water. We drink bottled water. We try to do everything because we understand the problem of lead. Since 2018, the lead levels have increased and are dangerous to the public health. So much that the state and the federal corrective action needed to be taken immediately so that the residents have safe drinking water. Benton Harbor is a Black majority community desperately in need of environmental justice. Founded in 1891, Benton Harbor is a small city of approximately 9,700 residents who are 89% African American. Economically and politically polarized community that is the world headquarters to the Whirlpool Corporation. Next slide, please. Benton Harbor Public Works Department lacked the capacity to acquire water samples and the knowledge to encourage its residents. The city lacked the leadership, workforce, know-how, and resources to carry out the basic sampling. The Benton Harbor Community Water Council, which is led by me, had to step in to help them. Benton Harbor estimated it would take up to 20 years to replace lead service lines. This is unacceptable. The city has more than 2,500 water lines and still learning how many have lead or galvanized service lines replacement. The city estimated it would take 20 years to complete this work, would jeopardize the next generation of kids. Once again, it is unacceptable and does not enforce the federal or state LCR. Benton Harbor has not distributed filters to the residents during the LSL replacement safe water drinking. The city have not provided residents with pitchers, filters, training, or other safety drinking options while doing this work. The Barron County Health Department has filters that residents must pick up and do not offer training or installation. Next slide, please. Benton Harbor water sample testing of the two schools find that level at 394 parts per billion and 640 parts per billion, which is truly unacceptable. There's no way in this world that our children should have to go to school and drink water with this quality of water in it. Over the years, Benton Harbor Testing in schools was done very infrequently, and when it was done, the sample was very small. Recently, testing had been done by the Benton Harbor Community Water Council on its own because the city is not doing it, and then found these results. Benton Harbor residents need government to provide portable water made available at no cost to the city, county, state government, and community organization, training residents to install faucet filters and replacement filters. For more than 3 years, community groups have sought outside donations and resources to provide residents with safe drinking water. During the city lead crisis, the urgency of action that the residents deserve has not been met, and an equal sense of urgency and polarization by the government, actually, to ensure safety water available at all times. Next slide, please. This is when we pass out water all over the community. This is part of our team. We have our youth, we have Eugene Anderson, and we have our youth passing out water to everybody in the community, and because we do not want them to drink that water. Next slide, please. These are the Benton Harbor data summary. From June, September 2018, 22 parts per billion. January, 27 parts per billion. July to December 2019, 32 parts per billion. January to June 2020, 23 parts per billion. July to December 2020, 24 parts per billion. And it goes on and on and on like that. We even had a high of 440 in a person home per billion. And that was during the January-June crisis that we had. Also July, 240 parts per billion. Next slide, please. Benton Harbor summary to the EPA. The EPA must require local information be provided to Benton Harbor residents that lead levels are highly variable and water presents a possible serious risk. EPA must widely educate the residents of Benton Harbor on steps they can take to protect their families and their children. The EPA must lower action level to protect health. No amount of lead is safe and must not be higher than 4 parts per billion. The EPA must establish a maximum contaminated level at 1 parts per billion. The EPA must require Benton Harbor full service line replacement in 10 years to bring down the action level rather than the 20 years that they're saying right now. 20 years is far too long for a community that only has 9,700 residents and 2,500 homes. That's way out of line. The EPA must train water utility and community on proper and timely water sampling. The EPA must address the financial burden of the lead crisis so they do not continue to fall on the residents of Benton Harbor or Highland Park or Flint, Michigan, and any place else. The EPA must improve the water filter giveaway in Benton Harbor at the stage because it is right now a total failure. The EPA must conduct environmental justice analysis as part of the rulemaking to ensure that the regulatory decisions result in impact to all communities, especially community of color and low-income neighborhoods. The EPA must install filtration system inside the school, especially because spending resources on long-term testing and assessment. Next slide, please. Next slide. The EPA must help small utility increase, improve their technical capacity, skills, and community education and resource development, not allow older systems in low-income community to be privatized in other systems. Provide grant money. The EPA must provide grant money, not loans, to environmental justice communities that cannot afford to pay back loans because of high poverty rates. The EPA must require local and state government to provide portable water during lead action level crisis through the replacement. They must do that. The EPA must demand that the water utility and officials step up their efforts to train residents and provide adequate supply water filters and ensure accountability from Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLES. The EPA must encourage justice 40, financial investment immediately for water system capacity infrastructure and lead program. Prioritize edible outcome. The EPA must prioritize edible outcome in small cities and towns, particularly those with less resources and capital than medium and large cities. Correct all the issues above and have the Historical Resort and Environment Justice Committee not receiving equal access to clean water and sanitation information. Next slide, please. Align LSL replacement priority with the city water main replacement plan. Prioritize in environmental justice and high level action, level neighborhoods and other developments. Political priorities are driving water and main repair replacement. Analyze cumulative public health costs associated with extended time to replace LSL instead of as soon as possible that are appropriate measures on appropriate. As assess ongoing health sacrifice and consequences that are being carried by impact people who deserve environmental justice reparations. Review Michigan LCRR change in the 2018 and improve upon them. The EPA LCRR water filter rules improvement. One of the things that we have in the city of Benton Harbor that we had, you heard of voter suppression. We had water filter suppression where you had to show an ID and your name had to be on the list in order to get a water filter. We understood that we needed the water filter, but we didn't realize that we would have to go through all these different things in order to get a water filter. And the sad part about this whole thing, you know, you give a person a water filter, we have found out that if you go to their home, most of the people didn't know how to put the water filter on. So instead of them using on the faucet, it would be sitting on their sink, and we had to go out and do it. They didn't train the people how to put the water filter on. They did not train the people what to do, that you need a replacement in 30 to 60 days. They did not even tell the people. And what they would do, they would only give them one replacement filter, which lasts from 30 to 60 days. That is unacceptable. If we're going to realize that giving them a water filter is just a bandage on a bullet wound, and it's going to continue to bleed. But what we have to do, we have to train the people to use the water filter properly. And this is one of the things that the Benton Harbor Community Water Council did. We went out and trained people how to do certain things, and we actually put it on, and became an issue with the Barron County Health Department, because what they was doing, they knew what we was doing was correct, but they decided that they were going to do it their way, and that's why it became a total failure. And number two, there's not a reason in this world that we should have a 15 parts per billion action level. That's not a reason. That's way too high. That's way too high. It should be at zero. Zero at, you know, that's when you're thinking about our children. Our children, they're the future. But they can't be the future if we don't allow them to grow. So we have to allow them to grow, and they won't grow as long as they have lead in the water. There is no such thing as a safe amount of lead. So 15 parts per billion is way too high. I like to see it at zero. Zero. And if we can get it at zero, our children would have the opportunity to grow. And until we allow them the opportunity to grow, it's going to continue just like this. But it won't be at zero, but at least we can get it at 4 or 5. I will accept that for now. But if we can get it on that level, that would be huge. And I think that's where we should be hitting at. And here's the thing, I'm going to talk about the LSS, the LSL, the lead service line. This is important. Benton Harbor has only 2,500 lines. And it's going to take them 20 years, up to 20 years to complete this. That is unacceptable. There's not a reason in this world that it should take 20 years to have to get rid of or remove the lead lines. That doesn't make any sense. How long will it take in Detroit? How long will it take in Flint? How long will it take in Highland Park? That's the question. We have to show them that this should be done in 5 years, 10 at the most. And anything over that is unacceptable. And we have to make sure that we explain that to the people, especially the people inside the city, the EPA, so they know that that is unacceptable. There are so many things that we need to do. Safe water is crucial at this time. And we need to tell people the importance of having clean water. And we need the EPA to step up and say no more. Those are my points. Let's deal with the water filter issue and sit in Benton Harbor right now. Let's deal with that. That's something we can deal with right now. Let's deal with that. And right now, someone needs to talk to the Benton County Health Department and get this thing moving in the right direction. And on that note, the next slide, and I'm through. Thank you so much for listening. For more information, please contact the Benton Harbor Community Water Council and the City of Benton Harbor, Michigan. Thank you so much for listening to us today. And I'm talking from my heart because I believe that we can do some things. And there's things that we need to do. And some of the things that need to be done first is dealing with the water filter issue. If we can start that, like I say, it's only a bandage for a bullet wound, but it's something, and something is better than nothing. Thank you so much.
Reverend Pinckney, thank you so much. So what we're going to do, we're now going to turn to the community presentation from Highland Park, and then Eric and Carrie, after the presentation from the Highland Park community, I'm going to ask for your reflections on the community presentation. So for the Highland Park community presentation, similar to what we did for the Benton Harbor, we have a set of opening remarks from elected officials, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gracie and Brian Donovan for the presentation. So I'd first like to turn it over to Councilwoman Jackson. Please unmute yourself and share your opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Esteemed Mr. Willis and guests, good morning. My name is Councilwoman DeBlon Jackson, and thank you for allowing me to contribute to this esteemed project. I am thankful that our city was chosen to participate in this discussion. There are many items that should be discussed about LCR, along with the effects of the community. The children are the ones that are most affected educationally and physically. When Highland Park began repairs on the water system in 2012, it was to be a temporary closure. However, it became a permanently closed, which the city received emergency services.
Councilwoman Jackson, you accidentally went on mute. Let me make sure that you're unmuted. We can't hear you here. Oops.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Sorry.
Okay.
If you could go back about 30 seconds.
However, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry, I was on a roll there. Excuse me. Well, the children are the ones the most affected educationally and physically. These Highland Park water repairs on the system began in 2012. Was to be a temporary closure. However, it became permanently closed, which the city received emergency services from the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department. Sampling of the water should be done in every Highland Park home yearly. However, I have questions about the cost and age of the homes in Highland Park. Before 1978, most homes used lead or galvanized piping. Many of those galvanized pipes were connected to lead service lines, so various connectors such as goosenecks that were also lead, which contaminate the galvanized piping. Those lead and galvanized service lines must be replaced on each dwelling according to LCRR by year 2041. Many of the older homes in Highland Park were built before or after World War I. All the materials used during that time was lead. To replace the underground pipes, permits are needed from the city's Building and Safety Department. This is an expensive task because the factors involved: A, how many feet of pipe replacement since homes sit further back from the street? B, the age of the home is more costly for older homes than new homes. There is a reverse C, water filter, which filters lead out, but that is a temporary fix, but it works. D, there is approximately about 4,583 dwellings in Highland Park. And according to the rule, at a cost of about $68,745,000 for pipes. And don't forget the permits, $11,457,500 in permit costs. Everyone knows that the homes in Highland Park are incredibly unique, and many are 100 or more years old now. The more modern homes do not have such a high price to replace. However, these homes in Highland Park will get the highest assessment. How do you pay to keep the children safe in our city from water that is not safe to drink? If the water is not safe to drink, how is it safe to bathe in? Your skin is the biggest organ and it takes in water when bathing. So we're taking in lead. We're being poisoned every day through bathing. Who will pay for this replacement? What costs or taxes down the road will affect the citizens of Highland Park or anywhere in the United States? We need help with this cost, and we need it now. Who will help the city of Highland Park, Benton Harbor, or other places get all the pipes replaced? We need clean water so that our children will not grow up with disabilities. And for that, I say thank you for allowing me to speak today. And you guys have a wonderful speaking of everyone else. And thank you so much. This is such an important endeavor to us.
Thank you, Councilwoman Jackson. I'd like to now turn it over to Councilman Bates. Please unmute yourself and share your opening remarks.
Oh, good morning, everyone. I want to thank the EPA for hosting this timely roundtable discussion regarding the lead and copper rules revision with Highland Park and Benton Harbor, Michigan today. I would also like to thank those individuals who are participating in today's discussion who represent federal, state, local government elected representatives, members from the community, and clean water advocates. My name is Kendrick Bates, and I represent the city of Highland Park as city councilman for District 2. Highland Park is a small community of 10,000 residents comprised mainly of people of color. About a third of the residents live below Health and Human Services poverty levels. The city's median income is approximately $18,000 per household. The city's water infrastructure is over a century old and has endured decades of disinvestment. These combined factors represent a substantial risk to all residents, especially children and seniors, to lead exposure in our municipal water. The data collected from impoverished communities such as Highland Park have shown water samples testing for lead can have varied levels. I have had my water tested from my kitchen tap to test at 181 parts per billion. A year later, from the same fixture, the test registered at 6 parts per billion, causing apprehension and uncertainty. Any amount of lead exposure is harmful to humans and therefore should be made a priority to be removed from our drinking water. The high cost of remediation of lead removal and lack of financial resources has made a complete citywide replacement of lead service lines a monumental task. Cost estimates to replace all lead service lines to homes, businesses, and rebuild Highland Park's water treatment plant could top $100 million. The city of Highland Park cannot shoulder this burden alone through its tax base and limited financial resources to replace all lead service lines. Financial resources from federal, state governments must be made available to ensure current and future generations are safe from the harmful effects of exposure to lead in our drinking water. As a country, if we are truly committed to equality, justice, rule of law, fairness, etc., then this should be made a priority. We should allocate the resources necessary to solve this problem because we know what it will take. Thank you for your time today.
Great. Thank you, Councilman Bates. So Angela, if you could please bring up the PowerPoint presentation from Highland, I'd like to turn it over to Gracie and Brian. Gracie, Brian, please.
All right, well, thank you so much for having this roundtable with Highland Park and Benton Harbor. My name is Brian Donovan, and I'm with Citizens for a Sustainable Highland Park. I also work for Solidarity, and I'm a co-director at the Cooperation Group. I would particularly like to thank Senator Stabenow and Representative Tlaib and Councilpersons DeBlon Jackson and Kendrick Bates for being willing to be on. Especially, I want to thank Gracie Wooten, who recruited me, and all of the other people that are participating on behalf of Highland Park. So we can go to the next slide. Actually, one other thing I want to say is thank you to the folks at EPA that did this revision. Both Eric Bernison and Carrie Whaling, we appreciate it. And we would like to exert as much pressure as we possibly can for you to make it better. I won't go through the whole list, but this is an all-star cast of folks in Highland Park. So we can go on to the next one. So I just want to point out where Highland Park is. So you see those two purple pieces in the middle of Detroit there. We're the one that is to the left of I-75. That is Highland Park. It was established as a city in 1918 and has managed to not be annexed because it's right next to Hamtramck. It shares that little border. That's why we're not in Detroit today. It's only 2.9 square miles in area. And we can go on to the next slide. So this is just some demographics. Some of these were already mentioned. Poverty rate is very high. The number of people with a college degree is very low. We're 91.7% Black or African descent. Almost everyone is speaking English, and we have 22% living with a disability in Highland Park. And it makes me wonder how much lead may have contributed to that over time. We can go on to the next slide. So there is a long history of water system neglect. So Highland Park was built out from 1910 to 1925. The water comes from Lake St. Clair, and the water system maintenance has basically been kicked down the road for 100 years. In 2012, the water plant was closed. Emergency managers took over the city from 2001 to 2009, although it was after the end of that period when the water department was actually closed down. At present, there's a consent agreement that requires all of the water mains to be replaced in order to reopen the water utility. Due to ongoing lawsuits related to billing issues, HP does not have access to the same level of service as other Great Lakes Water Authority water systems. And most importantly, HP does not have access to the GLUWA Water Assistance Program. Presently, the Highland Park Water Department is managed by Metro Consulting Associates, who I think have done a reasonably good job given the challenges that they face. We have issues with low water pressure related to the connection to GLUWA water. Initially in 2012, it was connected to Detroit. And then in the bankruptcy of the city of Detroit, the water authority was switched to a regional Great Lakes Water Authority. But that connection to Great Lakes Water Authority was meant to be temporary, and it was instead permanent, or at least until the consent agreement is met, which will take quite a while with current funding levels. So we can go on to the next one. So in addition to the water repairs, street repairs have been postponed because we know that the streets are going to have to get torn up to replace all the water mains. So this is affecting quality of life on many levels. We can go on to the next one. So there's a disproportionate burden on current Highland Parkers. Residents now pay $50 to $80 a month for water and drainage. $38 is fixed cost to pay the bonds that are going to take 20 years to replace the water mains. And now the lead line replacement has to be done as well. There are loan funds available from the state and the federal government, which is great, except that we can't afford to raise the prices. We're already impoverishing people, and foreclosures are allowed based on unpaid water bills in Michigan. So all Highland Parkers deserve affordable water, and Highland Park needs grants to finance the infrastructure upgrades and a fair pricing structure to reduce cost burdens on seniors and families. Ready for the next slide. So the lead and copper rule revisions should be based on health. I realize that is asking for a lot, but that is what is required. Lead is a neurotoxin which causes irreversible damage, especially in children whose brains are not yet fully developed. The costs of this rule not being based on health are expressed in education and healthcare systems, and also the price of water. The effectiveness of the lead and copper rule should be measured in health and education outcomes in communities that have been poisoned. We'll go on to the next one. I got a lot of words on this one. I won't go through it all, but we have kind of two perspectives on this. Corrosion control treatment is necessary and it's insufficient. So I'm going to do these points in the opposite order that they are on here. Even though Highland Park had a lead action level exceedance, Michigan didn't require the Great Lakes Water Authority to study or improve corrosion control treatment for Highland Park. 11 Great Lakes Water Authority water systems had exceedance in 29, serving a combined 333,000 people. There was no change in corrosion control treatment. No one's looking at the overall public impact in this large combined water system. The water change in Highland Park from our own water facility to the Great Lakes, actually it was to Detroit, but is now the Great Lakes Water Authority for fresh water, was never studied. And I am confident, or I believe it's very likely that there were problems that were created when a new water source was introduced to our 100-year-old water mains, and nothing was even looked at. So anytime there's a change in water source, especially in aging or old infrastructure, there has got to be a coordinated effort at corrosion control. It is necessary, but it is insufficient. Adding orthophosphates or blended phosphates to drinking water may reduce, but does not prevent lead in water. It is not protective, nor is it an alternative to lead service line removal. There's no safe level of lead. All lead needs to be removed from the tap to the mains, and the mains are already all going to be replaced. Corrosion control benefits chemical companies. Now, it is necessary. I mean, we need the lines not to break down until they can be replaced, but it is not a welfare for the people and corrosion control cannot be considered an avenue for remediating lead action level exceedance. We can go on to the next one. Oh, I'm actually pass over to Gracie Wooten at this point.
I'm Gracie Wooten, and I'm going to finish up the presentation. Elevated lead levels were found in 14% of the children tested in Highland Park. This is a slide from 2018. Similar blood levels have been in children in Flint and also in Benton Harbor. There's no safe lead levels for children. There should be no lead in our drinking water. Next slide. Highland Park had an action level exceedance first in 2019. What we're doing with this presentation is advocating for a comprehensive public education. When the exceedance level happened in Highland Park, citizens were aware of the danger of this. Education must be ongoing about the harm of lead in service lines and the limits of the lead and copper rule. Perhaps the Ed Council should take this on nationally. Next slide. This slide shows the results of the sampling data from 2019 when Highland Park had the action level exceedance. There were 36 homes tested. 9 of them had exceeded the 15 parts per billion. Now the blue, that's the testing at the resident side of the home, the first leader, and the orange is the fifth leader testing. The horizontal line going through the graph is the 15 parts per billion. And you see the 9 homes that were exceeding that level. Next slide. Now, in Highland Park, there was a reactive response to the 2019 action levels. And there was a response, but again, we feel that the response should be, or the education about lead and water should be ongoing. Shouldn't wait until there's some kind of action level. So there were community meetings, at the rec center, and there was media announcements that went on, and free lead testing in homes, water distribution, and free faucet filters with free installation. And filters and pitchers were distributed, and that's still ongoing. Next slide. Now, we support the inventory, the lead service line inventory that the lead and copper rule revision is talking about. But we believe this should go further. The inventory should be results or orientated, and it should be orientated towards the swift removal of lead service lines in a transparent and equitable way. The plan should include justification of the priority in the order of replacement and should be based on elevated blood levels and health needs. The plan has to be broadly shared with the community to avoid the perception of favoritism. Next slide. There's no safe level of lead for children. Sampling in schools once every 5 years in 5 locations inside the school is not enough to protect children from lead in drinking water. The lead and copper rule revision should take a proactive approach and require schools and child care facilities in communities with at least one child with an elevated blood level to adopt the Filter First program and install a filtered water system in schools. Here, We see at Barber School, our elementary school, Highland Park, as a result of emergency management and just the overall disinvestment during that period in our community, and the emergency management of the school system, we now have only one public elementary school in Highland Park. We do not have a high school. But this is proactive in terms of Highland Park School District, where they have installed a filtered water system at Barber Preparatory Academy Elementary School in the Highland Park District. Next slide. Michigan's lead and copper rule is the only state which has a deadline for the removal of lead service lines, although the time should be shortened. Environmental justice communities who've suffered harm should be first to remove lead service lines. Federal funding should cover the costs of lead service line removal in harmed communities, not ratepayers. Next slide. Our recommendations are, they've been made, in the presentation, but I'll just take a moment to just go through them. Lower the action level to a level as close to zero as possible to protect public health. The FDA standard for bottled water is 5 parts per billion. Shame on the FDA. The American Academy of Pediatrics says children are harmed at 1 part per billion. Corrosion control is not enough to qualify as a mitigation for small water systems if the action level is triggered. Water departments must do more. Remedial actions should be proactive, not just reactive. We should prohibit partial service line replacements. It's been demonstrated that partial replacements mean the home is contaminated more. Schools and childcare facilities must be required to adopt a filter first program in the community with elevated blood levels in children, lead levels in children. And this is one that's very, all of them are important to me, but this one in particular. Implement comprehensive and ongoing public education about the harm of lead and the limits of the lead copper rule. Perhaps the Egg Council should take this on nationally. Small communities like ours don't have the capacity to fund a large campaign around the lead levels. So, and everything has to be geared towards the removal of lead service lines in our community. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to present Highland Park's recommendations to the EPA.
Great. Gracie and Brian, thank you very much. Okay, so we're now going to switch to the discussion topics. We've got about just under 90 minutes left, and so we've got about 30 minutes left for each discussion topic. The first is identifying lead in drinking water. The second is addressing lead in drinking water, and then the last one is communications and outreach. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to invite Eric and Carrie, to maybe Eric and Carrie, if you could keep it to under 2 minutes, but I'd love for you to share with the community some of the things that you've been hearing. And then after I hear from Eric and Carrie, Alexis, I'm going to come to you first, and then to you, Dr. Tynes, to give some first opening remarks, and then I'm going to be asking folks to raise their hand and jump into the conversation to share your perspectives on the things you think are important for EPA to hear around identifying lead in drinking water. So Eric, I'd like to come to you first. Eric or Carrie, to you first, and then I ask that you keep it to under 2 minutes.
Yes, Rob, absolutely. So let me first of all say that there was a lot of wonderful and really important information about the significant impacts that these two communities have had in terms of lead in their drinking water and the actions that have been taken, and then the ongoing challenges that these communities face. I'm going to be brief, and I just appreciate that a number of people raised a number of themes. But what I'll try and identify are what the themes are, more so than identifying the particular individuals who made them. Let's start with children, because that was a clear theme. The concern about protecting children, that there's no level of drinking water exposure, lead level exposure to children, is a significant driver. Environmental justice concerns was another theme. The disproportionate impacts that communities of color and disadvantaged communities have faced as a result of lead in drinking water, and the burden of infrastructure replacement was another theme that led into concerns about both affordability, how can consumers pay for the costs of these actions to remediate, and then the clear need was communicated about the need for funding from the federal and other levels to support that. Some specifics I heard about when it comes to the mitigation measures, filters. I think they were characterized as a bandage for a bullet hole by Reverend Pinckney, but a necessary and immediate measure, and that those need to be we need some very important attention. Lead service line replacement was a next really significant mitigation measure, which was a recurring theme in everyone's point, and the need for that to be timely. 20 years was mentioned as a time that's way too long, and a much less time. 5 to 10 years is a time frame that I heard people call for. Action level, the action level lead and copper rule, the concern is that 15 is an inappropriate level, and that the agency needs to lower the action level to levels as close to zero as is possible. Other themes that I heard about, other technical issues, corrosion control treatment is important, but it's not enough. And systems need to do more than just corrosion control. The importance of ongoing education about the health risks associated with lead in drinking water. And then schools, again, coming back to that first theme of children being so important, EPA needs to do more when it comes to schools. And there was a strong suggestion for a filter first approach. So those are just some of the high level themes. And Carrie, I don't know if there's anything to add, but.
Just a couple things. I think, Eric, you really captured a lot of the themes that I heard as well. And I will say I grew up in a small town in Northwest Indiana, so I know Benton Harbor very well. I've been there many times. I grew up in Valparaiso, and I went to public schools there. And one of the things that I really like about participating in these discussions is I get the visuals from people who have experienced this situation with lead in their drinking water, and it really comes to home when you hear the visuals. And one of them I heard, I think, from Representative Tlaib, was the garbage bags over the drinking faucets in schools. And having grown up in that area, and to know what the visual of that to me is striking and disturbing. I that really brings, I think, the message to home about the schools. I also heard the need for resources, and the resources particularly not being loans, which are hard to repay, especially if you've got already a burdened community. And so the need for grants instead of loans. And also I heard the filter giveaway being a failure, because in at least in Benton Harbor, because people needed to be given information about how to install them, how to use them, how to replace them. And so just giving people the filters is not enough. There needs to be more. And then I also heard the message loud and clear, I think, from Ms. Wooten in particular, about that education and remedial action has to be proactive and ongoing. So I think that certainly is a message that we will want to take home and think about ways that we can address some of those. So those are some of the additional items that I heard and that struck me. So thank you very much for presenting all those.
Okay, great. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Carrie. So I'd like to now move to the identifying lead in drinking water theme. And so at the for the next 25 or 30 minutes, I'm going to ask after we get the first remarks from Alexis and Dr. Tynes for folks to raise their hand and then jump into this conversation. And then if you had something that you wanted to share during this 30-minute block of time that you didn't get to, I'm going to give you an opportunity to type that into the chat. So Alexis, I'd like to turn it over to you, and then Dr. Tynes, I'll come to you, and then I'm going to ask that folks raise their hand to jump into the conversation. Alexis.
Hi, good morning. Again, my name is Alexis Ramsey. I am a member of the Highland Park Human Rights Coalition, and I'm also vice chair of the Michigan Democratic Party Black Caucus. Lead is one of our top priorities in our community. Highland Park's water infrastructure is over 100 years old, and we still have wooden pipes underground. The mission of the Highland Park Human Rights Coalition always has been and will be the safety and quality of water served to our residents. As you know, not only in Highland Park, Benton Harbor, but throughout the state of Michigan and throughout this country, lead must be the top priority, the removal of lead in our system. From my own experience, I see the difference of water quality in our community after we were placed on a backup water system almost 10 years ago, when we only should have been on that system for no longer than 7 days. Lead levels have gone up tremendously in our community. While our water department has begun mitigating major issues we face in this great city, it's still tons of work to do. Lead line replacement and lead pipe replacement throughout our community is crucial to the health and safety of our residents. Lead line replacement must again be the top priority. The focus needs to be not only replacing lead lines in new development areas, but also in our neighborhoods where we have homes that are over 100 years old. While some of the community's aging infrastructure has been replaced, we believe that there is still a need for additional funding in our community for this project to not only be a success, but in order for it to move in a more efficient way. Lead line replacement is the key to our community's health and safety and changing out our aging infrastructure. But another major piece that's needed is the replacement of our water plant in our community. This plant went down in 2012, and we believe that this is the reason why our lead levels have gone up. Again, we were placed on this system almost 10 years ago when we should have only been placed on this system for 7 days. So again, I would like to thank the representatives, the EPA, and all of the community stakeholders. But this must be a united push for all distressed cities with aging infrastructure. Again, Highland Park is a unique 2.9 square mile city with residents who are full of love. But what we need is continued access to clean and affordable drinking water. Thank you again for listening, and I look forward to future discussions.
Great. Thank you, Alexis, very much. I'm going to come to Dr. Tynes, and then please, folks, don't hesitate to hit Alt-Y to raise your hand, or to raise your hand by going to the participant list, because after Dr. Tynes, I'm going to open it up for anyone who's interested in sharing their thoughts on identifying lead in drinking water. Dr. Tynes?
Thank you. I'm Dr. Tynes, internal medicine pediatrics, and for the city of Benton Harbor, it's public health director, it's chief medical officer, and also this medical director from the Benton Harbor Community Water Council. I'm going to address the questions at hand. So the lead services line and inventory. So in Benton Harbor, we contracted with the company to do the inventory of the lead pipings that's going into the homes. I recommend that to all communities. And in Benton Harbor Community Water Council worked directly with the water department as well as with the city to do the twice a year as required monitoring, but we recommend quarterly monitoring once the water levels are down to 0 to 0.4 parts per million, or frequently until the level is in acceptable range. In terms of the tap sampling frequency, that's what that will address. In terms of tiering and the sample site selection, right now it's randomly done in the 3 identified areas. And the new sampling methods Uh, there need to be new methods downward, the training of the staff and staff and residents, as well as any personnel that's going to be involved to increase the efficacy and turnaround. In Benton Harbor, why it's so important that we do this, because if we look at 2015, the sanitary survey, it identified the lead problem, and which was not addressed and still need to be addressed. And so we see that transition from 2015 to 2017, and the survey showed that the pipe network represented 124 million in replacement value, crying the need for an additional financial resources and support. Why? To prevent the potential impact on the public health by allowing or introducing contamination into the water supply. In 2015 to 2019, infant, children, pregnant mothers drank lead contaminated water, and the injury occurred and the effect continues, screaming the need for assistance and resources. So the burden must not be placed on the victim, but it must be placed on those contaminating businesses or current contaminating business, and we must invest in human capital and potential. We must create a business-led removal fund supported by the businesses that contaminate it, as well as some federal assistance to remove the lead pipings as well as the lead contaminations in the water. Water filters need to go directly to the water councils of those cities, or to the city's actual health department, not the county's health, not just the county's health department. And there's an action, and this may be result as an accidental structural systemic racism that has been increased from the crisis level to the public health threat level that may be hindering some of these actions, colored communities of color and these African American communities, and particularly in the African American community. Why so systemic is that the African Americans are the only people that have been made a permanent minority and underclass by the 1790 naturalization laws, and also the African Americans are the only people enslaved by the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Supreme Court, and the state Jim Crow laws. So these communities, you're going to find the highest lead levels in that community, but it's not directly related into a slight on those European communities. But remember that the whole lead piping system was brought from Europe as introduced by the African Moors that came into Europe and were there from 711 to 1492. And that lead piping was the standard of water irrigation, but the technologies has deteriorated over time, and the chemicals that were used have led to the lead leak and the harm of the children. So I think a concerted effort to put resources into these oppressed communities to make sure that this is a birthright that all Americans had when they first came to America, and that we really need to establish that birthright and invest in human potential. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to come to Marion next, and then Juan next. So Marion, and then please don't hesitate to raise your hand, and I will come to you next. Marion?
Yes. Let me say the reports have been great. A little, but we've been out in this water situation since 1990s, you know, and still people are having a hard problem. City council and all of them, we still have a problem with everybody trying to take, because this water is still there. As far as I know, once a lot of this stuff dropped, as far as September, when they drop and increase the amount of money we probably have to pay for water, who's going to get the results of that? Are the people that we represent. And probably slide back in there. They're going to probably try to slide back in there that, putting the water bills on our bills and stuff like that. We got a lot of work to do. This was a beginning. I'm glad we have participated in this beginning, but we still got a lot of work to do. When we get those big containers talking about to check out the water, mines that sit at my house or on my porch for the longest. And, they don't come back and check that type of stuff. And so I'm glad that the panel have talked about that, the need for folks to be trained, the need for folks that we end up getting in the neighborhood to work with us on this, have some kind of, ends up being people that really will take time to really talk to the community and what have you. You know, we are appreciative of what has happened in this first round. Let's make the second round better. And that second round should be, and I know a lot of you ain't gonna want to hear what I got to say, but I love working with y'all. But on the other hand, I got some things that we need to see a water affordability plan here. We need a minute in that, because Highland Park has suffered tremendously in the past, where people have lost their homes and everything because of this water situation. So, we look back and we say, let's be for real. Are you trying to push us out of Highland Park or what? I'm not saying you. Or what? People don't trust folks when they come to the community, to their houses, thinking that the water department is going to shut off. And I think we're trying to break through that particular ice. At least here in Detroit, in Highland Park, we were able to set up this committee. And I'm glad Gracie was one of the people that joined, and all the rest of the folks that joined, in Highland Park. But we need more understanding of the community. Not only understanding, have the community to understand what y'all talking about. And so when is the next meeting? Let's have more people in the community here, because it's not right for us to have struggle since the 90s on this water out here. Let me tell you, you can turn the water on in the morning sometime, and what you smell is terrible. It's terrible. Y'all know, and I'm glad you have brought it out. You know that this darn water in Highland Park, Hamtramck, everywhere else in the state, if one city have it, you better know another city has it. And so we need to be stepping up and telling whoever's controlling whatever they controlling, that we got to turn this crap around, because we don't want a city that do not have people in it. And if they do have people, you're afraid to even talk to the water department, because you're afraid that your water is going to get shut off. We want people to live in Highland Park, not run away from Highland Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. So I've got Juan, then Brandon, then Shamikia, and then I've got several other folks lined up. So I ask that maybe folks keep it to under 2 minutes so we can make space for everyone. Juan, please.
Okay. I'm trying to find the unmute.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Beautiful. My name is Juan Shannon, and I'm a member of the Highland Park Community Crisis Coalition. I'm also an independent developer of a smart neighborhood in the city of Highland Park called Parker Village. I thank you for this opportunity to vent/present some comments. And, everyone has brought up some very important points. I believe we would not even be in this roundtable if people didn't already know there was some issues. One of the things that is not focused on a lot is that getting to the solution or fixing the problem basically causes other problems and perpetuates the circle of these problems. The health and welfare of the citizens, disrupting road and infrastructure repair, discouraging people and companies to move here or develop here, unfair overpricing of citizens, which continue to circle poverty, foreclosures and displacement of families that become homeless or other problems. we absolutely need to move forward with vigor and speed and a bunch of other adjectives that I'm too upset to even think of in order to fix this problem with the water infrastructure. The Highland Park Community Crisis Coalition and myself distributed over 100,000 bottles of water in the city of Highland Park. We did this without any government assistance. So imagine how many more people we could have helped or how much more we could have achieved with any assistance. You know, 3 independent organizations came together and distributed 100,000 bottles of water within a couple of weeks. You know, Gracie mentioned that we received the water filter apparatus from the water department. I believe the state also was involved in bringing that resource to Highland Park. The thing that I felt about that is, you know, it definitely was a help. Someone that I think from Benton Harbor mentioned a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It definitely was a help. It doesn't seem like there was additional thought process with that emergency move, because there was no discussion with the people that received that apparatus that, oh, by the way, you're going to have to pay for the filters on an ongoing basis as they wear out without our help. And on top of that, there's no discussion on how long or if there would be a day that we would not need those filters. So this is going on, I believe, a couple of years now that people received that apparatus, and everyone was thankful, including myself. And, you know, a couple of years later, I'm still going to Costco, BJ's, wholesale, and all the rest of them, buying filters. Now, I may be able to afford a 3-pack of filters every once in a while, but everybody isn't. So you have this apparatus, and if you can't afford to get the filters, guess what? You're back to non-filtered lead in your water. So
thank you. Great. Thank you, Juan. And so I'm going to ask that folks, in the interest of time here, because we want to make sure that we get to some of the second topics here. I've got my order of 5 people in the queue, and after these 5 folks, I'm going to switch to the addressing lead and drinking water theme. And so I asked the next 5 individuals if you could strive to keep it to around a minute. That would be really helpful. I've got Brandon, then Shamikia, then Reverend Pinckney, then Carmela, then Councilwoman Jackson. Mr. Tyus?
First off, I want to say thank you for allowing me the time to be and allowing us the time as far as Benton Harbor and Highland Park is concerned to identify the lead stresses that are occurring in our community and quite frankly, all over the nation. And I would like to dovetail on some key areas that people have elevated. One of them mainly being education. Education, because water is a foundational piece of life, literally. And with that being said, water overflows into other areas of our life. And so without that education, without the education of our foundational piece, we create more issues moving forward. This is what I mean. In Benton Harbor, since the end of 2019 to the beginning of 2021, we have had 3 times the water treatment plant has distributed untreated water to the residents, okay? They have distributed this untreated water to residents, and then to notify the residents of what to do, they send out a boil advisory. Now, a boil advisory makes sense when you first hear it, because we typically hear when there's bad things in our water, we need to boil it to kill the contamination. But here's the issue. Lead is not a virus nor a bacteria. Lead is a heavy metal. And when you boil your water, you actually increase the leaded content within your water. And then you're feeding that to your children, to your grandmas and grandpas, yourselves. And imagine when you put that over to the children, and it has scientific studies showing that there will be lower IQ points from consistent consumption of lead, and there will be more aggressive behaviors because of what the lead does as it attacks our system. Now, as you can see, unless you're blind, I am a Black man, and I have lived through the adversities that Black people experience from law enforcement. They typically have the media perspective of becoming more aggressive. So when you are giving predominantly Black neighborhoods water-infested, lead-infested water that you then boil to increase the content and then increase the aggressiveness within the Black children that already have such a hard stigma to face already, we are feeding the problem that we are trying to put a solution to. Do you see how this evolves into more than just a water problem? But if we can just keep our water safe, we can increase the IQ of our children. We can reduce the aggression in their behavior. And we can continue to not only raise education in school, but raise education on their water, on what to do and what not to do. So education. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. I've got Shamikia and then Reverend Pinckney. Shamikia.
Hi, my name is Shamika Nichols. I work in Highland Park, and I recently moved to Highland Park as a result of the work that I do there. I just want to take a minute and thank Brian and Gracie for an excellent presentation and representing a wonderful city. Since COVID, I began working remotely, and I also began homeschooling. I have two sons, ages 4 and 8, and we're home most of the day because of working remotely and homeschooling. We do have filters on both the kitchen and the bathroom faucets, one of which I was given from the water department when we moved here, and the other I purchased out of pocket and continue to purchase filters for. Although those are some safety precautions, baths, brushing teeth, and especially when my boys run in from trying to cool down after playing outside, always causes concern and worry for me. Understanding that Highland Park has the highest percentage of children with elevated blood lead levels in the state is the reason for my concern. I understand also that children are especially vulnerable to the effects of lead poisoning, that it can hinder their nervous system and their cognitive development. And it's been mentioned before, you know, we're taking steps forward to try to eradicate some of the issues and other outlining issues in our city. But when I think about the fact that I'm exposing my children and potentially setting them back in a health capacity, I cringe, and it makes me want to reconsider my choices of living in Highland Park, as beautiful as a city as it is, and as much work that's being done there by the residents to try to restore the community. We definitely understand that lead in water continues to be a health risk and affordability issue for Highland Park residents. And what we most fear is the possibility of a Flint water crisis here. Lead pipes are the greatest source of lead in drinking water, and replacing them is the best way to reduce exposure. And we would just need to support. The people here are already galvanized and ready to take action. We just really need the support to be able to find solutions for our community. So I just wanted to say my few words, and thank you for your time, for listening and considering our future.
Very much appreciated. I've got Reverend Pinckney, Carmela, then Councilwoman Jackson, and then I'm going to ask that we just roll straight into the topics on, excuse me, addressing lead in drinking water. Reverend Pinckney?
Yes, Reverend Pinckney here. What I want to talk about is the school itself. Can you imagine having your child going to a school and it has 640 parts per billion in the water. And the education board members and everybody said it's okay because they don't drink the water anyway. What if one person drank that water? What if 5 people drank that water? What if 10 people drank that water? The problem is the lack of education and knowledge and wisdom about lead. You see, one of the things, and I have to be honest with you, a lot of stuff about lead I didn't find out for about 5 to 10 years ago. I didn't quite understand it because there was nobody talking about it, especially here in the city of Benton Harbor. Nobody talks about lead. It was the best kept secret that you ever heard of because nobody talked about it. Nobody really cared. Nobody, what's a little lead? A little lead is not going to kill you. One guy made the statement, I've been drinking this water for 20 years. There's nothing wrong with me. But that wasn't him talking. That was the lead talking. You see, sometimes lead talks to you too. And in this case, it was. We have to make sure we're doing the things that we're supposed to do because one of the things, the EPA, you got to be proactive. You got to start talking about things. You just can't send out some literature because most of my brothers and sisters, I love them to death, but they don't read. Most of the time when I go, we go door to door. The Benton Harbor Community Water Council, we go door to door to people and talk to people about lead. We go door to door and talk to people about the water filter. We go door to door to people and put the water filter on their faucet. And that's what we do. But we have to have help from the EPA in order to be successful at this. We can win this battle, but everybody got to take part. And one of the final thing I want to say here, we must start giving money that we don't have to pay back here in the city of Benton Harbor. Because we are one of the poorest communities probably in the country. The only thing that have uplifted this community, they put in a Jack Nicklaus signature golf course that's going to become St. Joe in a couple of years. You see, they built it on Benton Harbor land, and then it's going to become St. Joseph, Michigan. All the houses and everything, you see it's 89% African American, but it's really that area right there. And I'm going to end by saying this. They spliced into the water system of Benton Harbor and contaminated it and didn't tell nobody. And that's how we found out. That's when we started talking about lead in our water. So I'm asking the EPA to do a better job in educating the community. Benton Harbor, Highland Park, Flint, Michigan, and Detroit. And if you could do that, I'd be more than happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Pinckney. I've got Carmela and then Councilwoman Jackson, and then we're going to roll right into that second theme, addressing lead in drinking water. So if you have thoughts that you want to share about that topic area, please raise your hand and we'll get to you. Ms. Patton.
My name is Carmela Patton. I'm a member of the Benton Harbor Water Council. And my question is, in addition to providing education and information about the health impact of the lead, will an explanation be provided so that people know that the action level and the exceedance level are only tools for measuring? How does the EPA intend to collect data on a water system leading the services line replacement programs? Will the rules require systems to send data about how many lead lines have been replaced each year?
Great, and what I'll ask is maybe somebody from EPA, if you could please put that answer to that question in the chat, how the current lead and copper rule revision treats notification. That would be wonderful, and that way we won't have EPA taking up airtime. Yeah.
And how many lines and how many public and private lines are left to be replaced?
And then information on inventory requirements. Thank you, Councilwoman Jackson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much for offering this time. I just had another comment. In looking at going back in time a little bit to the 90s, I was a band director at Highland Park High School, and we had the high school up on Woodward Avenue. And I can remember early in the morning, we had band practice, and we would take the children out to march on the field, and then they would get thirsty. And then when we would come inside, I would have somebody start the faucet because all this stuff came out of the faucet for the children to drink. We didn't know anything about the contaminants. But what I did one day in the water is I poured it in a glass, and all I saw was cloudiness. So I think about my students who was in that particular school and the repercussions of what happened to them as far as drinking that water. So if it was like that back then, the water's cloudy and a discoloration, over time, in all these years, what has been the effect on our students since then? I don't know if anybody's been tracking that, but I think it's important. And also, if you are watering plants and you have lead-based water, what is the effect of that lead in your food supply or your plants? Does the plant, just like trees, filter out certain things and you could eat it? Or what these effects, I don't think anybody has talked about, but I would like to know about. And like I said before, we're bathing in it. So if we're bathing in it, our skin is receiving the lead whether we drink it or not. So we're getting it all the way around all the time. So if there's a filter or something, how long does it take per house to replace a lead lines going into the home? And it's been said, if you replace the lead lines going into the homes, it would be cost effective for the homeowner on the inside of the home if there are any lead couplets or goosenecks or what have you. You should replace those as well, because the bottom line is you're still getting lead, even if it's from the outside. So I talked about cost before. So it's even, I would say, under $100 million for the lead lines for all in the city of, inside and out, in the city of Highland Park. And where would these grants and monies come from? Will the people have to pay it back in taxes later? Those are some of the questions when we get started that we need to know. What type of tax hikes will they, because once you give away money and that reserve or grants are, in that reservoir of cash that's spent on the cities, well, they got to get the money back somewhere. So what do we do? Who do we talk to about the financial end of it? And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Jackson. You provided a perfect segue to our next topic, which was the addressing lead in drinking water. And so I want to now encourage folks who have comments and thoughts on this topic. So I've got Eugene, I'm going to come to you in just 1 second. Before I do that, Shamikia and Brandon, if you have additional opening remarks that you want to have on this topic, please go ahead and raise your hands, and then I will come to you after Eugene. If not, then I'm inviting folks to please share any thoughts with EPA about some of the potential topics here on addressing lead in drinking water. So I've got Eugene, and then Brandon. I'll come right back to you, Eugene.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Well, I had a question in the chat, and I didn't know if it was going to be addressed towards this lead in drinking water, and I had a power failure and it went out. So should I wait about the question because it looked like it's on this topic?
Yeah, well, why don't you put the question out there, and then if it we're not. I'm asking EPA to potentially answer questions in the chat because I don't want EPA to take community time from the community voice. So why don't you ask your question, and then if it's appropriate to answer, we'll make sure that it's answered in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to ask your question verbally, or do you want to put it into the chat?
I could just say it now.
That would be great.
Okay, guys, my name is Eugene Anderson, Sergeant at Arms of Benton Harbor Community Water Council. I'm pleased to hear that the commercial confidence report will let people know how much lead is in their system and about the availability of the inventory. But will there be information included in the LCRR for consumers to protect themselves if there is 15 part per billion of lead in the water of the system? The EPA has acknowledged there is no safe levels of lead for all humans, regardless of age. And then it says, but especially children and pregnant women. That's the question, but I got an additional part where the young lady talked about how much it would cost. It would be something to hear about the smaller cities also, like how much money it would take for a city to replace all the piping or lead in the city itself. And if that was the case, if there's a grant from the government that could cover all of that, then we wouldn't have to worry about taxing citizens in the city to replace the lead pipes. If we can just get a grant to cover the whole system in both cities, that would help us out.
Great. Thank you, Eugene. And so if someone from EPA could put in the chat the question about the consumer confidence report requirement, and then also any provisions in the current LCRR regarding replacement funding. Next, I'm going to come to Brandon and then Carmela, and then I understand that Shamikia had to jump off, so we're going to go straight to comments here on addressing electric drinking water. So Brandon and then Carmela.
Thank you, Rob. So in addition to the point on education, I also want to highlight education in the sense that not only the city officials educating the residents, but making sure, number one, that the city officials are educated themselves. And then also making sure that the city officials are educating the governmental agencies. So when we began our canvassing back in around late 2018, beginning 2019, we found out through a statistic that about 60% of the residents did not know that there was a lead issue in their water. And Benton Harbor is actually one of the only cities that does not inform the EPA the names and addresses of the houses that they collect the water samples from. The reason was to protect the privacy of the residents. However, now hindsight is always 2020. It appears that they are more interested in protecting the knowings of their misdoings. So I also want to reiterate the fact that Benton Harbor must have more supplies, because another fact is the water department has not been completing their samples for, I believe, 4 consecutive to 5 consecutive runs now, and they do it biannually. And they have been required to collect 60 samples because they are out of compliance. And the Benton Harbor Water Council has done that job instead. And they continue to do that job. And the work that they do is much more closer to the ground than the work of the city. Because sure, they go door to door, so they have a more intimate relationship, but the education is one of the greatest pieces that is missing. And because of the lack of education, it creates a wider gap in the trust factor and puts our kids in a greater risk. So education, and you must provide Benton Harbor Water Council more resources to be able to continue, because they are the only solution that has been putting action in the city of Benton Harbor as it relates to water. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for mispronouncing your last name before. I had an R in there. I apologize about that.
Common mistake, but you're forgiven. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Carmela, then Brian, then Councilman Bates. Carmela?
How does the EPA intend to collect the water data on the water system needing the services line replacement programs? Will the rule require the system to send data about how many lines have been replaced each year and how many public and private lines are left to be replaced?
Great. Thank you. If someone from EPA could just put in the current LCRR information collection requirements, that would be really helpful. Thank you. I've got Brian and Councilman Bates. Brian.
Thank you. I have a few things to say. First of all, the speed of the remediation and removal is really critical and should be spelled out. And I think that while it's important that there be options, because every water utility isn't going to have the same problems, there should be specificity for what has to be done. So I personally think it should be filters immediately. And obviously it's come up that training and installation need to be part of that, and potentially replacement filters need to be part of that. That's just given out to the people that are identified as having lead service lines, or not just the people that tested at a high level. And I think in terms of the actual removal of lead from the system, start with the occupied houses. In Highland Park, or I shouldn't say that, on my block, there have been 2 lead lines replaced. They're both houses that are vacant who are getting their water hooked up. So in some ways that's convenient. It is not actually solving the problem, or it's solving the problem for new people that are going to move in, not the people that have been drinking the water and are paying for the line replacement today. So start with the occupied housing. And then, just about money. So there was so much money put into propping up the, say, commercial real estate market by the Federal Reserves. Huge amounts of corporate bonds were purchased to stabilize malls that are probably going to declare bankruptcy anyway, because they're just obsolete. And yet the willingness to put money into getting lead out of our local water systems, there's resistance. I really don't understand. I know that's not on the EPA, but I think that it is on the EPA to assume that the resources exist and to demand that they be applied. And they should be applied to occupied housing first, cities that have been traditionally harmed, and I'll just say that are subject to racist and even violent situations, such as with the police. So I think I'll stop at this point. I am so emotional, but thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak on this issue.
Great. Thank you. I've got Councilman Bates, and then Dr. Moncrief, and then Eric, Carey, I'm going to come to you to share what you've been listening, what you've been hearing, and then we're going to move to the communications and public outreach topic. Councilman Bates, please.
Yes, thank you. And just briefly, and then this has been touched on, but I think it's important to kind of reiterate this. The dissemination of information in poor communities, especially with low education rates, unfortunately is proven to be challenging. As the Reverend indicated, people do receive information in the mail, but they may not read it. I know our water facilities management group has sent out information, in water bills, separately, but yet again, the population still remains uninformed. It has to be a myriad of different activities and measures designed to reach people on different levels in order to make sure that they comprehend the importance of the information that we're providing. So it may not, it will have to be a sustained campaign. It may be something where we have advocacy agencies doing promotions, cities, the government, campaigns, public health, door to door. It has to encompass all of those things to ensure that everyone is knowledgeable regarding the hazards of lead, and then how to install water faucets and where to obtain resources, because one solution will not be able to provide everything that is necessary to keep, residents informed, unfortunately, in poor communities with lower rates of education. So thank you for allowing me to share that thought.
Thank you, Councilman Bates. Dr. Moncrief?
Yes. Thank you for letting me participate also. I think I'm going to be coming from a little bit different perspective with my question. As a physician, I'm often invited out to do health screening for high blood pressure, for cancer and diabetes. And I got to the point that, I was saying, I'm not coming out to do the screening unless I know that there's going to be some type of follow-up. I'm not going to go out and test people and tell them they have high blood pressure, or test people and they have cancer and they don't have a place to go to get those things treated. And so when we're going out and we're testing the water and we're letting people we know that they have lead in it, and we don't have a solution, that's terrible. And when you there is systemic racism built into this system. People respond to lead in terms of it in water, in terms of it being a business. Nobody cares that these African American communities are suffering from lead intoxication. Nobody cares. But what they do care about is when the EPA and other agencies start making funding available for them to go out and start screening, then these companies pop up to do the screening. And then they don't care that our kids are suffering from educational and developmental delay and physical ailments, but they only care about testing our schools or trying to fix the problem when money is available for them. I have a concern that as we start talking about, communities like Benton Harbor and Highland Park, Flint, that have large populations of underrepresented minorities, African Americans, Hispanics, people of color, I get concerned when we start talking about, it's going to take all these years to fix these problems. No, it won't take all these years to fix these problems if money is made available. People in this racist society, they understand dollars. What you have to do is make those dollars available. And not just today we were talking about, no level of lead is acceptable. That's true. But when you start passing things that says zero lead, the first people who are going to get advantage of that aren't going to be the communities that we're talking about today. It's going to be communities who have resources. They know how to get the money. They know how to get it. So those services are not going to go to Benton Harbor and Highland Park unless the EPA puts in preferences for communities of color to get those things. Otherwise, when you lower those standards, we're still going to be bypassed. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Dr. Moncrief. And so before I come to you, Dr. Davis, I'm going to ask that Eric or Carrie, just one of you this time, maybe spend a couple of minutes to share what you've been hearing. And then Dr. Davis, I'm going to come to you, and I know that you want to share your screen to show something, and we'll do that. And then after Dr. Davis, then we're going to move to communications and public outreach. And my opening remarks, I have Commissioner Adams, Ms. Wheeler, and then Dr. Moncrief again. So I'm going to come to Eric or Carrie first, and then Dr. Davis, and then we're going to go to that next discussion block. Eric? And maybe
Yes.
under 2 minutes, Eric, please.
Yes, I'll do my best. And again, once again, just a really important and impactful number of statements that have been made about the tremendous need and the impact. I want to go back to Dr. Moncrief and Brandon made some very important and impactful statements about the disproportionate impacts of lead exposure to people of color. Brandon's reflection upon the impacts, the developmental impacts, the loss of IQ that results from lead exposure amongst people of color exacerbates the disproportionate impacts that society has imposed upon them. And then Dr. Moncrief just made the point about the degree to which that also works against these communities of color when it comes to getting resources, which again stems to another really significant point that was made about the importance and the significance of funding. And as Reverend Pinckney said, not loans, but funding that doesn't, grants in the form of grants that doesn't require payback. This all also stems from the importance of protecting children in these communities and helping these communities grow vibrantly, and the importance of the community's futures developments to the soundness of their health. A lot of other important details about the way the rule works, but I think those are the themes I'm going to leave off at this high level.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Dr. Davis?
Yes, I'd really appreciate the opportunity to share today. You know, as Dr. Moncrief is saying, I'm going to go from a slightly different perspective. I want to explain to people exactly, not exactly, but what kind of happens with lead poisoning. First off, lead is an element, which it's an atom that it does not get broken down chemically by normal means, which means it's there. It's going to stay there. You can't burn it off. It's going to be in the soil. It's going to be in the, and so it's ever present, if you will. And unfortunately, I appreciate the EPA, how they've looked at things and what they've done. We've actually identified that lead was in gas, and so it couldn't be burned off, and so it would get into the soils. And so when we identified that if it's in the soil and then children eat the soil, you know, they're playing in the ground and they put their fingers in their mouth and the lead gets in their systems and they're lead poisoned, just that simply. And so it came to the point where it's like, if you lived in a house that was within 10 feet of a major street, then you have potential to be lead poisoned for your children. So the EPA stepped in and said they banned lead from gasoline in cars. I mean, that's huge. And so we look, and you may say the EPA doesn't really have money, but they have the means, they have the resources. So they have to really, I appreciate this forum to be able to, where you're listening to us, and then and so recognizing that we understand the significance of this, and you have the ability to make the changes. You make the recommendations and they will make changes. So what I want to emphasize is with lead, there's no minimal risk level. Any level in children is unacceptable, because we find that lead affects children mostly because it blocks the nerves from growing. And so we have developing children and it literally blocks. Even a small amount will block. And so you say, well, okay, you have a certain amount, they won't develop quite as fast as someone else. And so, you know, you look at it, it affects the developing children, it affects their intelligence, their mental development, especially in their learning, in behavior. So what happens in these communities that they're exposed to this lead, they actually go to school. Typically, we do not even notice it until they start school. And so we start saying they're a little bit slower. We put them in special ed. We have all these things in these communities where the kids are lead poisoned, and then we start having special ed programs. And the effects look a lot like attention deficit disorder. So a lot of the minority communities, the children of color, will be put in special ed programs and start giving medicines. And they don't need medicine, they just need to stop being poisoned. And so that's my perspective, is that there's no minimum level that it is acceptable. And so when you look at something like this, a little bit of lead, let me explain a little bit for how the lead pipes affect children and get into our water. It's like most of the pipes in the nation is lead. but it doesn't affect us as long as it's stabilized. It's when we disinfect and we have the processing treatment centers that have the chemicals that start breaking down the lead and it comes into the homes. So at any given time, if a treatment plant gives a little bit too much of the disinfectant, starts breaking it down, that community gets bombarded with lead. So I'm like, the thing is, it's such a big problem. And this is why the government, the powers that be, do not address it, is because it's too big. They realize, someone had mentioned, okay, it's $100 million or $1 billion or $100 billion to replace the lines in Highland Park. The government looks and says, we can't replace all the lines throughout the country. And so they say, we just put it to the side. Well, I venture to say this. First off, we know that the lead poisoning in children are the highest risk, the small children. Okay, have the government put a program together where they have whole house filters, even digging into the ground and having, before it comes into the home, put a filter, a whole house filter for that home of at-risk population at a low income area where it's no cost to the homeowner or to the tenant, but it is maintained by the water department that makes sure the water to that unit is safe. And focus on those children that have the babies, the highest risk. Focus on those homes. Now that's something that we can do in those communities that have high levels. Put that in place. Don't put it on to the tenant to say, you maintain this and you keep the filters going. No, have a system set up outside where they dig down, they put it in before it gets to them. This is an issue. Okay, I know I only have a few minutes, and so I have a whole presentation. Oh, and let me share this. I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Yeah, and Dr. Davis, I asked that you wrap up in about a minute so we are able to move to the next one, please.
We'll go ahead. It's like, this is what I want you to think about. This is like a house that has chip paint and all that, and the lead poisoning is the silent killer of dreams. When we poison our children, like we say blood pressure is a silent killer, right? Lead poisoning is a silent killer of children's dreams. They start from early on. And I'll tell you, when I was in the lead poison prevention program for the city of Detroit, we did a retrospective study of 21,000 children in the Detroit public schools. And we found that only 23 of them never was poisoned by lead. We had over 99% of the children had been poisoned at some point in their life when they were babies. And then we wonder why the Detroit public school system are these areas that have the population, low income population, why they don't do well on some of the standardized tests. Let's start from the basics. I appreciate your time. All right.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Davis. I appreciate it very much. So we are going to switch now to our third discussion topic. I know that we had organized Commissioner Adams, Linda Wheeler, and Dr. Moncrief to kick us off in this conversation. So Commissioner Adams, I'm going to come to you first, and then I'm going to come to you, Ms. Wheeler, and then you, Dr. Moncrief, and then I'm going to ask that folks raise their hand here on this topic. I know this has come up several times, since I would anticipate several folks have thoughts on this. So Commissioner Adams?
Oh, I'm a little lost. I can't see the screen, and I'm just getting in from another meeting, but I've been listening.
So Commissioner Adams, Reverend Pinkney thought that you might have some opening remarks on the communication and public outreach topic, and if you don't have anything to contribute now, that's okay, and you can just raise your hand if you do.
Okay. Well, for one,
okay.
No, I'll pass. I'll pass.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wheeler, did you have some opening thoughts on this?
Yes, I do. I apologize for not being able to be visual this morning. I've got communication technicality problems, but I can hear and I can view you on the computer. I want to give a warm welcome, and thank you to the EPA for selecting Highland Park to participate in the Community Roundtable. My name is Linda G. Wheeler. I am Highland Park Secretary of the Highland Park School Board and a member of the Highland Park Human Rights Coalition. The only way to limit lead exposure from drinking water in Highland Park or anywhere in the United States is to remove the lead pipes and service lines. This statement bears repeating. Highland Park has been struggling with water issues for years. The city was forced to shut down its own water treatment plant in 2012 and turned to Detroit as its water supplier. But it failed to bill customers for a time during that transition, resulting in astronomical bills for customers once billing resumed again. Highland Park now gets its water from the Great Lakes Water Authority, which took over as the regional water supplier after Detroit's bankruptcy. In 2019, the city's water department began to conduct free water testing for any resident who requested and began passing out water filters or water pitchers at the fire station and recreation center. Residents were advised to take precautions by flushing their taps for 5 minutes before drinking the water, which is an ongoing activity. 1 in 7 children in Highland Park has elevated levels of lead in their blood, a higher rate than any other city evaluated by the city, according to the State Department of Health. Education must be proactive for the public. The public needs to still know that lead in the homes is at a rate that is killing and crippling us all. Lead presents health concerns for people of all ages, particularly for infants and young people. In children, low levels of exposure have been linked to learning disabilities, which has been said and said and said and said. And when is it going to happen? Behavior problems and other issues when the babies can be saved. Just recently, on May 22nd, 2021, the Wayne County Mobile Unit conducted an event of free lead testing in Highland Park, Michigan at City Hall. Children under the age of 6 and pregnant women had their blood drawn and lead levels testing was free. I'm just about concluding. Lead is treated as a medical problem, yet the impact extends far beyond a blood test. Beyond cognitive and psychological scars, its toxicity and has been correlated to long-term effects that impact society at large, from wages to higher incarceration rates and the welfare system. More needs to be done to eliminate the problem before a child tests positive. It looks like we're still using our children as lead detectors. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I've got Dr. Moncrief. I don't know if you have additional thoughts on communications and public outreach. So I'd like to make space for you, and then I'll come to Dr. Tynes. Dr. Moncrief.
Okay, just a few more comments. I see my title down here is Disaster Preparedness Specialist. So as a disaster preparedness specialist, I tell you the disaster is here. And what we need to be doing is what we're doing. This is a step what we're doing today, letting the EPA know what our concerns are. But they're going to be going to other communities after they leave us. Okay, so and everybody's going to be excited about their communities just like we are about ours. So being prepared for disaster, I need for the EPA to understand our communities are disproportionately affected and they need to be priorities and given preferences when it comes to treating and solving these problems. We cannot be on the same level as other communities. And as these action levels and standards are changed, there needs to be preferences for our communities in each and every one. There's 2 different education pieces that are involved. It's the education of our communities, and that's what we're talking about today. But we do not need to lose sight of what Dr. Davis was saying, the education of our children. We talk about them, starting school, but as physicians, we check our children at the ages of 1 and 2 years old for their lead levels. We know the lead levels are elevated. This is not a secret. You know, to me, it's almost a waste of our time to be telling you that our children are suffering from it. We don't talk about the adults who are suffering from the lead intoxication. Because children's brains are growing the fastest, and we see the impact on it, and people's hearts are tugged by the children, but our adults are suffering from a lead intoxication too. And we've known this for years. And we've got data that shows that those behavior problems that the children have in elementary school go on to in adolescence to express themselves even more. And we see large populations in our prisons and our adults who have had lead intoxications. And we see them in cycling. We can relate it to when lead was in the paint and then taking lead out of the paint. And we can relate it to when lead was in the gas and taking lead out of the gasoline. Okay, we can see that in our adults. So for us to not address these problems and not give preferences to our communities of colors is really, really a waste. And I just want to say two more things. Then today I did not know that there could be lead in bottled water. I think it's a shame that the FDA and the EPA do not partner to make sure that if you're going to allow lead to be in bottled water, that it's not labeled. It should be like cigarette smoking. You know, this brand of bottled water has lead in it, because it doesn't make any sense for us to stop our kids from drinking water out the fountain and then give them lead in drinking water. Okay, and I also think the EPA should partner with the Department of Education, partner with these people to make sure that they know that, you know, that lead is in the water, because they act like they don't, and that we need to be doing things now. We need to have money going to these schools now to put filters on, so that as a part of the product, or replace the water supply to these schools. These are things that need to be done now, not 5, 10, 15 years from now, but they need to be done yesterday. And with that, I'm going to step away and let the discussion start.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Moncrief. I've got Dr. Tynes, I got Ms. Wooten, and then Commissioner Adams, and we probably have, in addition to those three individuals, probably space for 2 or 3 more folks, since we are about 10 minutes away. So Ms. Wooten, then it looks like someone put their hand down, Ms. Adams, and then Mr. Tyus. Gracie?
Thank you. I wanted to talk about sampling and the relationship of sampling to the chemical industry and also the medical industry. You know, we sample, and we know already that water is not going to remain in the same place. So that means that if I sample one day, and if I sample a little, you know, even hours later, you know, the value is going to be different. So we waste time sampling, and then that props up the chemical industry, because, you know, we got to get all these chemicals, which most of us, you know, if we could not have chemicals in our water, we would. And the chemicals can do, it's very, you know, hard to control, like the chemicals that are in the water, because they're dumping chemicals in to control other kinds of contaminants. And then after that, my phone distracted me. What we do is, as I said, it sort of props up the chemical industry, because, like, okay, I know that there's no safe level of lead for my water, and I know that. But hey, I'm not gonna get out the pipes, you know. I'm gonna allow people to just be treated. There's a treatment standard, you know, and then I'm gonna sample, and then the sampling is not gonna be accurate. We know that it's not gonna be accurate. And then, so that means that I pay the chemical companies a bunch of money, and then, you know, and to try to develop some, you know, formula that's gonna bind this lead to the pipes, you know, and then I end up on the other end paying all this money to the medical industry, because with medicine, you know, I mean, the amount of money that this country has to pay in medical costs is enormous. And the cost of that, plus the amount of money that we're investing in these chemicals, would pay for the cost to remove the service lines throughout the country, you know. So that's what I just wanted to say, that, you know, in terms of the sampling is not accurate, you know, and the emphasis should be on getting rid of the lead service lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tynes, I'll come to you. I'm sorry, I had a mix up there. You're up.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll be real brief. To explain why people are saying why to focus on the African-American community and the people of color, is that the African-Americans are the only people who created the need for a second United States Constitution, which are the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments and the Civil Rights Laws. And the African-Americans are only people classified in 2021 as 3/5 of a human and a peculiar species. And we're the only people that it was illegal for them to learn to read or write in return of education. But I see that things could change it by the EPA. I can see the EPA as a leader as in combating the historical and current effects of systemic racism by making policies and providing resources. The EPA can be looked at early prevention and action. The EPA can also be looking as effective protection of African Americans. So I think that you and the EPA have done great things with removing lead in the different environment. And I think we can continue to move that, and you can help the crisis in the African American community that have been here now over 400 years. And yet now we have it at a move from a public health crisis to a public health threat in terms of the treatment of the African American. And it's presented today that lead is a major threat to the African American community and the city of Benton Harbor in particular, as well as Highland Park and Flint. We need your assistance and resources, because you can be the heroes. You can be that effective protection of African Americans. Thank you, EPA.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tynes, coming to you next, and then we have time for about 2 more comments. So if you have additional thoughts, please go ahead and raise your hands. Brandon.
Thank you. So as far as the funds go, I feel like I have a different perspective, because I just look at how the money is moving. Whenever the government wants money to be placed in areas, they provide tax advantages. Okay, there are obviously people in this country and around the world who are making a lot more money than the people are in the communities. And that money can also be funneled to these communities. I think we focus a lot on public dollars because that's the money that the government supplies. But the beautiful thing about the tax code is they're set up as tax incentives so the government doesn't have to provide these services. So, for example, one thing that we can advocate even more strongly for are things like opportunity zone funds, which are essentially tax incentives for people with private money to come in and use their money, things called capital gains, for undercapitalized communities. I think we should create more tax credits for investors to bring private money so 2 things can happen. 1, more funds can come into the community, and number 2, these things can happen a lot more quickly. Like say, for example, we still have tax write-offs for oil and gas where investors are able to put $100,000 into it and then are able to get a $100,000 deduction back that same year. And that is killing our environment. So I'm just saying, why don't we this obviously, we're always talking about costs. We can expand it. For example, to move away from oil and gas, they've moved from oil and gas to solar. And so what they've done for solar to encourage people to spend more money into clean energy is that if you were to install solar into your home, you get a 30% credit on your money, which is $1 for $1. This may not make a lot of sense to us as the community, but it makes a lot of sense to the investors and the people who have money who can help us expedite our process as far as social responsibility is concerned. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are right near our time. We've got about 2-3 minutes left. Dr. Pinckney or Ms. Wooten, do you have any final thoughts, any closing thoughts before I turn it over to you, Eric, and to you, Carrie, for any final reflections and closing remarks? Dr. Pinckney or Ms. Wooten, any final thoughts?
I would like to say thank you so much to the EPA for allowing this roundtable. And I would like to make sure that we understand where we're going with this. We're working on the level of lead contamination. We know that 15 ppb is way too high. Let's try to get as close to zero as possible. Number two, let's not worry on loans. Let's deal with grants. If we can do that, that'll make me happy. And one other thing, let's deal with this, with the water filter system. We need a way to make sure that everybody get a water filter and they're educated about it. And that they need it put on, we need to put it on. And if you know, we probably need resources in order to do it. If you can do that, that would be great. And thank you all so much. And I want to thank not only Benton Harbor for an excellent job, also Highland Park, you were tremendous today. Thank y'all so much.
And thank you too, Reverend Pinckney. You are dynamite. And I really appreciate this opportunity that we were given. And I want to say that, you know, again, there's no safe level of lead in our water, in our drinking water, and that there is support for that idea among people who care about humanity. I mean, if I know, you know, no one wants to consider that their children are being permanently scarred by, you know, having to have lead, you know, babies, you know, being affected, you know, by formula. And so what I'm saying is that, you know, we need to, you know, listen to the experts, you know, on this. You know, we spend time listening to the experts when it comes to how much chemicals, you know, we should put in water, you know, or on sampling. Well, I don't know if you're listening to, I don't know if we've been listening to experts on sampling, but you know, we need to listen, you know, to our doctors, you know, the medical field, and say, well, hey, let's get these service lines out of the community, and think seriously about the amount of money that we're paying in healthcare, because, you know, we don't deal with this, you know, critical issue. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Eric, Carrie, I'd like to turn it over to you for final remarks.
Thank you, Rob. I want to thank you for facilitating today's discussions. I want to thank Reverend Pinckney and Ms. Wooten for the time you've taken to both organize and then to provide those really important and impactful thoughts today. I think we have a much better understanding of the impacts that lead in drinking water has had on the people of Benton Harbor. And I think we've got a really, in Highland Park, and we have a really important understanding of how we can consider improving the public health protections under the lead and copper rule revisions. Your community perspective is really going to be impactful as we go through this process of review. I want to make sure that you know that we're going to be sharing this information on the agency's website site. It'll be available for those who want to go back and listen who weren't able to participate again. And that we still also have an opportunity to get input through our written docket, which can be accessed through our regulations.gov website. So thank you so much, and we appreciate your time today.
I would just add that I think the communities of Benton Harbor and Highland Park are well served by the passionate and